Hi, I'm August Keller, and this is my review of The Fall Guy. This movie has been well received, so I know I'm the bad guy here when I say that I think it's mediocre. I found it to be very generic and jumbled, frankly. It tries to combine comedy, action, romance, and mystery, and I just don't think those genres gel. I mean, they can gel, but I don't think they gel here. Instead, they often undercut one another. For example, I think the comedy often undermines the action and mystery, making them feel pretty tensionless. And because the romance is so secondary, I found it to be lacking in intimacy. Things like that. They really just kind of clash instead of coming together as one cohesive tone. It's just kind of a mixture of parts. A big reason why I think is because the characters are very flat and stagnant. The only times I ever felt really engaged with these characters is because of the likability of Gosling and Blunt, not because of the material. Um, it just kind of their personality shines through here and there, and even then, it's kind of becomes pretty sporadic and only temporary. So I cannot say that I connected with these characters. Um, a big example is that I think the protagonist, Gosling's character, is set up with an internal conflict that's quickly abandoned, which I found to be a very big missed opportunity. Gosling's character, he breaks his back in the beginning of the movie, and it would have been nice to see him deal with feeling broken and feeling discarded by the industry. That would have been great. He could have been like, starts to get mixed up in this action plot, and it would have been nice to see him hesitate to engage and struggle to overcome this trauma that he's dealing with as he's so the external conflict is also mixing with this internal conflict of his, and that really makes for a good story. And that also would have given the movie some themes. It would have been speaking to how the industry chews up and spits out stuntmen. I mean, I know this movie is trying to, the marketing is trying to posture as this love letter to stuntmen. This would have been a great theme to explore. That's the struggle they go through, right? But instead, this broken back of his is almost immediately irrelevant. It's just this start, and then he gets going with the plot, and it's never comes up again. And his character has no layers. He has no internal conflict. He just immediately becomes this generic action man that's doing these action things and not for a moment thinking about his back problems, not for a moment feeling like um, he's broken or like struggling with anything. He's just doing the thing, and he seems perfectly fine, perfectly capable. He's only really driven. The only real motivation he has is that this romance with Blunt's character. So that really cuts the story down. It just becomes a generic plot, empty drama, and no themes. It's just very very flat. It also, because there's only one superficial motivation guiding this character's every choice, there's no surprises. There's no turning point or like difficult decision for him to make. He's just always pursuing Emily Blunt's romance. And I have to reiterate that romance is very shallow. These characters, because these characters are so one dimensional, their romance is one dimensional. So who cares? What is there really to any of this? On the positive, there are some positives to this story. There's some meta awareness. The movie is constantly commenting on movie making and the story itself. The humor is sporadically successful. I think, again, that's really more because of Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt more than the script. And they do have some chemistry. Blunt and Gosling, they're charismatic people, so when you put them together, there's charisma between them. It's not the most chemistry I've ever seen, but there's chemistry there. But again, that all kind of rings hollow because there's no real earned heart to the story. So it all just kind of it's there and it's fleeting. So yeah, altogether, the main thing I can say about this story is that it kind of is lacking in sufficient emotions or originality. There's neither of those things here, so it's kind of hard for this movie to be engaging. At best, it's fleetingly inoffensive. I wasn't mad at it, but I didn't ever really care. It's just very generic. Technically, the Fall Guy assembles common set pieces, minimal tension, and muddled tones. I found it just kind of blah. Because this movie has little else going on, a lot of pressure is put on the action sequences to be next level, and they just aren't. They're fine, but they're not blowing me away at any point. I know they tried to do a lot of practical stunt work, but that doesn't really come across in the final product. It does a little bit, but I think it gets kind of lost in the mediocre direction. The action sequences lack artistic vision or clarity to really highlight anything special going on. It just kind of comes and goes like any other action movie I've seen. Um, the cinematography uses oneers and framing, but there's little meaning involved. The oneers are technically impressive and fairly immersive, but they lack emotional motivation to really stick and really stand out as, wow, that's a good shot, because it's just kind of a oneer for the sake of being a oneer. The editing has some montages and split screens and intercuts and action, of course, but the overarching structure feels clunky. There's a lot of cross cutting, there's a bloated climax. So both of those things really kind of undermine the momentum. The momentum is always kind of just sputtering. So even though the movie has an average runtime, it feels like it's too long because the momentum just kind of never really gets going. The sound design has some voiceovers, emphasis, distortions, and smash cuts. Action, of course. I find that I'm an easier grader when it comes to sound design because I don't think there's a lot of obvious responsibility to it. Sound is important, it can really elevate a movie, but I find that it's really hard for the sound design to really sink a movie, especially on a studio budget. Um, so I feel like the sound design here is a good example of that. It's complex. There's a lot of complexity to an action movie when it comes to sound, but I feel like it really just does its job and little more than that. It doesn't sink the movie, but it also doesn't really elevate the movie either. It does its job. So there is so there's that. The music is the there's like a recurring needle drop motif of like dad rock music, which I guess kind of fits, but kind of felt arbitrary to me. Even distracting at times. There's like a remix to a dad rock song that I found to be just didn't really fit. It felt kind of like a square peg in a round hole there, and kind of took me out of it for a little bit. There are dashes of homages to classic action shows like Miami Vice, but other than that, those are really small, and I would say 85-90% of the music in this movie is just kind of I felt more or less indifferent to. The production design does the movie making industry establishes the whole movie making industry thing, but there is a kind of a lot of product placement. I understand that product placement, can be excusable, especially in the movie making industry, but I found it to be pretty in your face at times, which I am not a fan of. The cast has fame and fit, and I would say mediocre depth. Gosling is great, of course, but I don't feel like his character is very specific to Gosling because I didn't find his character to be specific in general. His character isn't specific to anyone. I don't For a movie like this, where the characters are all just kind of whatever, you're really gonna have to like blow me away with like a star-studded cast for me to like really feel like the casting is great. And besides Blunt and Gosling, I found it to be all pretty indifferent. You know, Aaron Taylor Johnson is a name, but I don't know, whatever. The effects have stunts and pyrotechnics, but not as much as I was hoping for. There's a big explosion, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that this movie was trying to be practical with its stunts, but I felt like there wasn't really like a show stopping stunt. You know, John Wick and Mission Impossible have both kind of become known for having some really impressive stunts in their movies, and I was kind of disappointed that this movie didn't have anything really even close to those movies in that department. It had stunts, it had a lot of stunts, and it had a lot of pyrotechnics, but you know, for a movie about stuntmen, you would think that there would be something really impressive here, and I didn't really see it. So overall, I think The Fall Guy is less than the sum of its parts. It has ingredients that work, and I think there's a good movie in here, but it just doesn't come together. Um, I would say it's better than a movie like The Gray Man or Red Notice, but not by all that much, not by as much as you would think. Um, well, if we're just talking um, fine action movies in the last few years, I would say I prefer Ambulance or even Bullet Train to this. It's not bad. I just found it to be pretty forgettable. So yeah, that's about all I have to say about The Fall Guy. If you like what I'm doing here, please feel free to like and subscribe. I also have an Instagram linked in the description. I would love any support there as well. But at the very least, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.